Hello, Molweni, Sanu, Hujambo, I'm Tembekile Mkhototo. Welcome to Unwrap Africa, where every Sunday night we focus on the latest news, trends, and successes of the African continent. Siyaqhaqha. Coming up on the show tonight, we'll speak to Senenhlanhla Mnguni, a lawyer for Bellarmine Mugabe, about a social media post suggesting that the son of Zimbabwe's late former president was recently spotted shopping in Midrand, Johannesburg. And then we'll speak to a football analyst, Francis Ajumane, and former referee Victor Hlungwani about controversial decisions during the FIFA World Cup. But the conversation more broadly is about how Africa fared during this year's FIFA World Cup. This is Unwrap Africa. And this is our question tonight related to the football. What are your thoughts on how African teams performed, in fact, during the World Cup? You can let us know on Facebook, where we are SABC Unwrap Africa. On X, we are SABC News_TV. Use the hashtag Unwrap Africa so we can find your responses. Let's get you to that developing story that we're following tonight. So then lawyers for Bellarmine Mugabe have tonight described as false and misleading a social media post suggesting that he was recently spotted shopping in Midrand, South Africa. He is the younger son of former President Robert Mugabe. Well, earlier this year, he was deported from South Africa after pleading guilty to charges including the pointing of what appeared to be a toy gun and contravening South Africa's immigration laws. Well, his cousin is currently serving jail time for a shooting of a gardener at a Joburg property, which was what initially landed both men in handcuffs. Let's get an update now. Speak to Mugabe's lawyer, Senenhlanhla Mnguni, who's joining us on Unwrap Africa. Good to have you on the program this evening, sir. So first things first, you deny that Bellarmine Mugabe is in South Africa. Can you guarantee that he's not?
Certainly. Look, we've taken instructions in as far as the whereabouts of Mr. Mugabe, and our instructions are clear. Mr. Mugabe is currently not in the Republic of South Africa.
Where is he?
Look, I'm not at liberty to disclose where he is, but I can assure you that he's not within the borders of the Republic of South Africa.
So he's not in South Africa at the moment. Has he been in South Africa at any point since his deportation in the last few months?
No, not at all. That's just speculation. And I think the image that was used of my client is an old image. My client has been banned from entering the Republic of South Africa for a period of 5 years. On account of the sentence which he received from the Alexandra Magistrates Court. So he certainly would not want to flout the laws or a court order which in essence banned him from entering the country for 5 years. So no, he certainly hasn't been since late April.
So this picture then that has been circulated, especially on social media from this morning, he appears to be in a shop. In fact, not appears to be. The photo is of a man wearing a mask in a grocery store, apparently in Midrand, here in Johannesburg. You say it's an old image. When was it taken? And do we know how it was even taken?
No, certainly not. The image and when it was taken, I cannot give you instructions on, but it certainly was not an image which was taken at any point during the course of this year, certainly.
So as things stand, you're not at liberty to tell us where Bellarmine Mugabe is. You say he has not come back to South Africa since he was deported a few months ago. Does he want to come back at the end of that 5-year ban?
That's something that we haven't discussed. And should the need or the desire to enter the borders of South Africa arise, then of course we will follow the proper channels. At this stage, it's not something that's been communicated. And I stated earlier on, there's a 5-year period within which he cannot enter the borders of the Republic of South Africa. So at this point, it's not something that is even a consideration.
And you're absolutely certain, Senenhlanhla, that there's nothing at this point that can contradict the version that you're giving to us, that Bellarmine Mugabe has not been back here and is not in South Africa. There isn't any chance that you could be factually contradicted on that.
I stand by my instructions, and certainly, I'm quite confident, based on the instructions that I've received, that my client is not in the Republic. And I would be very surprised if there was any evidence which would point to him being in South Africa. But I stand by my instructions.
So lastly then, As things stand, what are you going to do about this publication? It's an X account that started circulating this image. I think it's called, looking up the name now, Izwi24. Are you going to take any action against them for spreading what you are essentially saying is a lie?
Yeah, look, at this stage, we're weighing up our options. It's not something that we wanted to give too much entertainment. As a matter of fact, we did not think that it would reach a point where people would give credence to these rumors. We just thought it was, one of many social media posts which we've seen, which have touched on the matter of our client. I mean, there was one which stated that there was going to be a party thrown in the name of our client in Bryanston earlier on, which is also nothing further from the truth. So we're going to certainly give it all consideration in order to see whether taking legal action against people posting these untrue and false posts, we may deter them by taking legal action against them.
Sinentandla Mguni, thank you so much for speaking to us on Unwrap Africa. That's the lawyer for Bellarmine Mugabe, the son of Zimbabwe's late former president, who was deported from South Africa following the shooting of a gardener at a property in Hyde Park in Johannesburg. But Mugabe ultimately was nailed on a different charge to do with immigration laws and pointing what appeared to be a toy gun. So his lawyer telling us that he is not in South Africa and has not been back in the country since his deportation a few months ago. Well, we're going to stay with issues related to Zimbabwe because there is still this mounting criticism after the enactment of Zimbabwe's Constitutional Amendment Act number 6 of 2026. It effectively postpones the country's next harmonized elections from the year 2028 to 2030. The new legislation has sparked widespread concern among opposition parties, civil society and international observers who all argue that it basically weakens democratic governance and undermines citizens' constitutional right to regularly elect their leaders. Zimbabwe's opposition has also strongly condemned the new law and vowed to challenge it through legal processes, including an appeal in the Constitutional Court. The Zimbabwean government, for its part, has defended the amendments, insisting that they are lawful constitutional reforms that are aimed at promoting political stability, ensuring continuity in the implementation of long-term national development programs, and thirdly, strengthening governance. The legislation has intensified these political tensions that have been in place for years in Zimbabwe. It's expected to remain the subject of legal and political contestation in the months ahead.
The newly enacted Constitution of Zimbabwe Amendment Act 6 of 2026 was published in a special government gazette after President Emmerson Mnangagwa ascended to the legislation on the 7th of July. The enactment concludes a contentious 5-month legislative process that began when the bill was first gazetted in February 2026, triggering extensive public consultations and heated parliamentary debates before finally securing the required parliamentary approval and presidential assent.
The bill CAB 3 passed last week, and the people of Zimbabwe can rest easy again that 2028 is no longer a date of anxiety for them. They can go back to their usual work, hard work, which has revived this economy in the last 7 to 8 years in ways which nobody had ever foreseen could happen.
However, some legal practitioners are challenging the validity of the newly enacted law, arguing that key provisions in the legislation are unconstitutional and therefore unlawful.
Even slavery was lawful. Even colonialization was lawful. It was done in accordance with the laws which were there at the time. CAB 3 is one such law. It is an unlawful law. And people right now are looking to the Constitutional Court to do the right thing and overturn this illegal piece of legislation.
You can have that signature by the president, but it will not mean he can be in office beyond 2028. That message must go to him. His signature alone cannot buy him space in the office. And that is what will happen. It is the people that can only give you that space.
Zimbabwe's opposition has strongly condemned the newly enacted legislation, describing it as a significant setback for constitutional democracy and the rule of law. They have vowed to challenge the law in the Constitutional Court, maintaining that several of its provisions are unconstitutional and were adopted through a flawed legislative process.
First, there is the issue of whether this whole process made any sense. So there is litigation that actually challenges the entire process and wants it set aside. So there is litigation of that nature. There is litigation which is looking at the fact that we want a referendum because you have taken away the right of the people to elect their president. And I think that is the litigation that Tenda has already filed with the court, etc. And then there is litigation that deals with the processes, you know, the bribery, that nonsense where people were given money to vote, etc. That litigation is still on the table. And then there is a litigation that the president did sign an act. Now he assented to a bill where he is himself benefiting.
But the opposition is not putting all its eggs in the legal basket.
There will be dialogues, there will be prayer meetings, there will be citizen petitions, public lectures, community mobilization, peaceful demonstration, peaceful marches, national constitutional assemblies, coordinated, peaceful national mass action.
Message is both for Mutsvangwa, for ED, as well as the Constitutional Court, the judges. They must know that the fundamental resolution of this crisis is going to the people of Zimbabwe in mass action, exercising their sovereign power under the Constitution. So that is where we're going, and we have every confidence that the people shall triumph.
According to Zimbabwe's Information Minister, Zemushoda, the process leading to the constitutional amendment followed all procedures required under the Constitution and provided a platform for meaningful national dialogue between Parliament and citizens. He said the extensive public consultation process ensured that Zimbabweans had an opportunity to express their views before the legislation was enacted. Efat Msekiwa, SABC News, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Welcome back to Unwrap Africa. World football's governing body FIFA has been criticized after controversial decisions during this year's edition of the World Cup. Scrutiny over refereeing and VAR decisions come on the back of officiating in Argentina's 3-2 victory over Egypt in the World Cup round of 16. Well, Egypt exited the tournament sadly, but cried foul after Argentina overturned a 2-0 deficit to basically snatch victory. While the pundits have come to either defend or attack the match officials who were part of that match and various other games that have left more questions than answers. Well, let's speak further then about Africa's showing at this year's World Cup. We're joined tonight by Francis Ajumane, who is in Yaoundé, the capital of Cameroon, while here in Johannesburg in studio with me is former referee Victor Hlungwani. Gentlemen, my thanks to you both. I'll start with you, Victor, here in studio. We'll talk about the World Cup performance in a moment, but we cannot have this conversation without pausing to reflect on the sad news yesterday. 25-year-old Jaden Adams confirmed to have died. He was part of the Bafana squad that was at the World Cup. Truly tragic.
Yeah, truly tragic, and good evening. I refereed him while he was playing for Stellenbosch, very young player, and disciplined player. I don't remember giving him a yellow card because he was disciplined, but I only remember one day when he said to me, "Hey, offside, offside." I said, "Hey, Muni Raini." He said, "Mr. Refkan, Afrika's proud." I said, "No, proud not a biggie, but what Africa's proud if you travel me." So, you know, he was one person who was hardworking, good tackler, young as he is. So as senior referees, because at that time, I was a senior referee in the country because I was older than all of them.
Right.
Yeah, so now I will be, you know, I will be more educational to the young players.
And for him to be gone at 25 after his first World Cup, truly, I mean, it's unimaginable for most people.
Future Bafana, we were devastated because we were looking for more from him, as he did well in the World Cup, and you're looking at the age, his age group of Mufokeng, Jaden, you're looking at 2 more World Cup. But when someone leaves us like that, it's devastating.
Francis, in Yaoundé, I want to get your reflections then overall on Africa's time at this year's World Cup. It's being hailed by some as the continent's best showing during the World Cup. Would you agree?
First, I want to start my condolences to the family of Mr. Adams and to the South African people and the whole continent. It's a sad news, tragic news for the continent. Back to your question, I think, yes, it's been a progressive curve for Africa at the World Cup. If we look at the last World Cup in Qatar and we look at the World Cup this year, I think there is hope for African football. Apart from Tunisia, I think the other African nations, 9 other African nations, had a very good showing out there. But personally, from an analytic or statistical point of view, I think Africa could have done more. We cannot rely on our laurels to be satisfied that we've gone through the group stages. I think Africa could have done more, but it's already another step, or it's a good step, and we can work towards a better performance in 2030.
What do you mean by Africa should have done more, Francis? What did you find was lacking?
I said they could have done more. If I want to break down individually, teams individually, for example, I would personally say Senegal disappointed because they had the talent, they had the skills, and they had the group to go far in this competition. I was looking at them as at least quarterfinalists. But if you look at the performance against France, they played on equal terms. But when you look at other things that hampered Senegal, for example, their pre-World Cup preparations were hampered by the coach not signing his contract, some internal squabbles between experienced players, and even the lack of experience of the coach, the head coach. For example, when you see they lead a through against Belgium, it's something we have to regret, because I believe that if they had gone past Belgium, at least they would have been quarterfinalists. I take another case, Egypt. It was a case of inexperience, and it was a case of inexperience from the technical bench, because we can talk about the refereeing decisions all day long, but they poorly managed the game. I think the last quarter of the game was poorly managed. If you look at when Argentina finally equalized or took the lead, if you look at the 5 minutes that they were ahead or they equalized, you saw an experienced team that could keep the ball, that could turn around their team, but that was lacking in Egypt and in most of African teams. And so I think they have learned. Their lessons, and I hope they can come back better prepared.
Victor, you've officiated matches. The refereeing was criticized as being slanted during this World Cup against the African teams. Is there any truth to that? Were we treated unfairly by the referees?
No. There's VAR. When there's VAR, any decision is reviewed, or VAR, there are specific situation where it enters. And the most important one is goal or no goal. Penalty or no penalty, straight red card, mistaken identity. Now they've even extended to a second yellow card and incorrectly awarded corner kick. So if you check all those things, they contribute to a goal. So now, if you say Africa was robbed, now you need to be specific. For example, if you say Salah was tripped, there's no foul on Salah. You say goal was scored, and then VAR came back to review the decision, and they see a foul. It happened in our game, South Africa, Nigeria, in the AFCON, where Pesita was kicked inside the penalty area, and then Nigeria took the ball and went on to score. They celebrated in Lagos. Then VAR came in the AFCON and changed and said, we must get a penalty. And we scored that penalty. We celebrated. Now, those who did not see that, when they see an Egypt situation, they say, no, it has happened before. It's not for the first time. So Egypt was not robbed. The only thing we picked up on that game was a player that was pulled inside the penalty area, where we felt Egypt should have got a penalty. That is the only situation. The rest, the referees did a splendid job on that day.
Okay, so Bafana, for instance, is one of the teams that managed to get in this World Cup much further than they've ever gone, right, Victor, in any of the previous World Cups. Does the improved performance by the continent overall during this tournament, does it bring us closer to perhaps an African victory anytime soon at the World Cup?
Morocco has shown, although Bafana, when we play Morocco, we whip them easy. But now I'm surprised they advance further than us. But if you look at Senegal, they scored 2-0. They were leading 2-0. And You know, they came in to equalize in the last minute. Against South Africa, we were scored in the last minute by Canada. So we just need to fix concentration in the last minute. Switch on. We say switch on. Yeah, vuka. Last minute. So as a vuka is halal. So that is the only thing that Africa must fix, because majority of them, they were scored in the last minute. Vukani.
Vugani, wake up. Francis, is the message from Victor here in studio for the African teams. So the preparation then for the next World Cup, how soon does a nation even begin to do those preps, Francis? And based on the notes that you and Victor have given, how does Africa build on this momentum? And then lastly, I know I'm squeezing a lot into one question here for you. How much or to what extent do you think, Francis, that Africa benefited from the expansion of the World Cup, for the first time 48 teams taking part instead of the usual 32?
I'll start with the last question to say, yes, Africa really benefited from the expansion, and we have proven that we deserve more places. Apart from Tunisia, as I said earlier, the 9 other African nations proved that Africa deserves its places. We have the players are playing with the other European players in their club at club level, so they are almost of the same level. And talking about the preparations for the next World Cup starts now. Preparations for every World Cup starts at the end of every World Cup. You see, we've come back and other teams, managers are getting sacked or other managers are resigning. And so now it's time to build on what we have achieved so far. For example, Bafana, they have a squad that if they can keep the squad together and just inject new blood from 1 or 2 positions, I think they can build for in the next 4 years. But you cannot just sit, and we cannot just see the other 9 teams or 10 teams cannot just sit and say, okay, we are waiting for the next World Cup, because the other African sides will be pushing to be present in the next 4 years. I think of my nation, Cameroon. It's been difficult for us watching the World Cup at home. So 10 places for Africa, I think it is well deserved, and all 10 representatives have proven that Africa deserves to be at the biggest stage of the competition. We think of Cabo Verde, the really proved that African football has taken a step forward. So today, we have no minnows again in Africa. Every nation sweats and deserves its position.
Gentlemen, my thanks to you both. Francis Ajumane in Yaoundé, the capital of Cameroon, and Victor Hlungwani here in our Johannesburg studio at the SABC. Thank you so much for speaking to us. See you both as the teams then prepare to qualify for the next FIFA World Cup. And we'll take your thoughts on what you think of the performance of African teams at this year's showpiece. Let's see those reflections now. We'll look at X first. Let's see what people are saying about how African teams fared during the FIFA World Cup. We've got one here from Relebohile who says they did well because they were able to score most of the time, but they were not clinical, especially in the dying minutes of their games. Joe Black says, I'm just happy South Africa qualified against all odds and went on to qualify for the knockouts. It's a step in the right direction. Makale Jacob says that African football is very good, and the very wonderful presidential but European leadership is destroying football. So a mixed bag then of the assessment of the leadership, at least, of football on the continent. We'll continue to see then how the teams prepare for the next showpiece. Will you be there, and who will you be backing then? This is Unwrap Africa. Stay with us.